This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. The flora of Armenia is one of the most diverse and interesting in the world, and includes many favourite garden plants and their relatives. This week's guest, Tamar Galstyan, has travelled the length and breadth of the country, botanising and leading guided plant tours. She's recently published a field guide to the plants of Armenia, which includes more than 1,000 of the diverse range of plants found in the country. And in the interview, we cover the range of habitats and climates found in Armenia, what it's like to travel there to find plants, and how the native flora is being threatened by things such as climate change and grazing animals. I began by asking Tamar how she became interested in plants.
I have always loved nature and plants. When I was a kid, my family had a little house by the forest. I loved spending my hours playing with my sister and friends in that forest. My parents also loved nature, and we often went to see some other parts of the country on weekends. And much later, when I studied ecology, that was my second education, and then worked as an ecology teacher, my lectures were focused mostly on Armenian flora. That was almost 15 or more years ago. When I was going to talk about plants, it was almost impossible to find any pictures of Armenian plants in the internet or somewhere else. So to show those plants to my students, that's why I started to travel with a camera, take pictures, and later introduce those pictures to my students. Soon, for helping them, my website was created, then my Facebook page, Plants of Armenia, where I have published, I think, a few thousands of pictures of Armenian plants.
So apart from running your website and writing your book, what else is it that you do at the moment in relation to the botany of Armenia?
I am not a botanist. I graduated from the University of Fine Art and Theatre in Yerevan. That's the capital of Armenia, and I'm guiding. I'm doing botany trips in Armenia, and all my botany knowledge in botany I obtained in the field, traveling and taking pictures. Almost 10 years ago, I was asked to guide a group of English people who arrived to Armenia for botanizing. And since then, I'm guiding botany trips in Armenia and sometimes in Georgia, very often also in Georgia. I think I belong to those happy people who turn their hobby into their business.
That sounds good. So what is it about Armenia? What makes it so significant in terms of plants?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, Armenia is one of the smallest countries in the world, with population less than 3 million. You cannot see my country on the map unless you zoom in and look carefully. The territory of Armenia is less than 29,000 kilometers square. It's approximately 1/16 part of the territory of Sweden, or 1/15 part of the territory of California. The territory of the United Kingdom is more than 8 times bigger than the territory of Armenia. So it's one of the smallest countries of the world. It's a Christian country. There are parts where the climate is almost subtropical, and there are parts in Armenia, regions, with cold and snow winters and hot, dry summers. There are all forests here, Caucasian forests here, and semi-deserts with unique flora, wetlands and subalpine alpine meadows, dry arid forest, and steppes covered with millions of stipa. I think the diversity of flora and landscapes makes Armenia significant. Another important information about Armenia is that it's a mountainous and landlocked country with very diverse climate, nature, and soil. There is no zero altitude here. The average altitude of the country is 1,600 to 1,800 meters above sea level. Our highest mountain is 4,090 meters, and the lowest point of Armenia is almost 400 meters above sea level. it's a very diverse country, and there are more than 15 soil types in Armenia, including light brown soils to dark, rich soil full of humus. And in Russian, it is called Chernozem, which covers much of the higher steppe region of the country. And within those 29,000 kilometers square, there are different climate zones, as I told you, from everlasting snow caps and glaciers to warm, humid, and subtropical. This diversity supports flora with more than 3,600 recorded species, and I'm sure there are some species not recorded in the country, but they exist in the country, in the mountains. What I love most here is that because it's a very little country, you need to drive just a couple of hours to see alpine carpets and snow melting streams, even in hot Armenian dry summers, when the temperature is sometimes more than 40. There are regions in Armenia when the summer temperature sometimes becomes plus 50.
That's incredible.
Yeah, even in such a hot summer, when you drive up to 3,500 meters, 4,000 meters, you can see alpine carpets.
Yeah. So you've written a field guide of the plants to Armenia, which sounds as if it was a very big undertaking. Who did you write the book for? Is it for people who come to Armenia and want to go and explore for themselves?
Yeah, as I told, I have a page on Facebook, Plants of Armenia, where I publish my own pictures of plants taken mostly in Armenia. The idea of collecting those pictures in one field guide arose years ago. Besides, through my page, I saw the interest of foreigners in Armenian flora. Many people visit the page and comment on pictures and share the pictures. Also, from time to time, some people who traveled in Armenia and took pictures of plants asked me to identify their pictures. So I saw that there is a lack of information about Armenian flora and tried to cover it just a little bit. This book is just a little attempt to make Armenian flora popular. And in 2020, when my trips canceled because of COVID, I started to work on the book, because finally I had time, lots of time to do that book with my colleague and friend Chris Gardner, who kindly offered to design the book. I think this book is for travelers who come to Armenia for plant hunting and for people who are interested in Caucasian flora.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you came to Armenia to look for plants, what are some of the rarest things that you might find there?
Okay. I think all plants are beautiful in their own way, but the most beautiful plants are always rare. I suppose because they attract attention and people collect them, reducing populations and disturbing habitats. Iris iberica, Iris elegantissima, Iris licotis are the most beautiful flowers among all those plants I have ever seen, and they are rare. There are really beautiful and rare tulips in the south of Armenia. When they flower, the slopes become red and yellow, just millions of tulips. All these plants are spectacular for me. A few years before doing my first trip, I read a little article about Wabelovia formosa. If you know that plant, it's a very little plant, 3-5 centimeter, and it grows in scree, and it's difficult to find it because it's very little unless you know it and unless you know the location where to search it. And I saw the pictures of that beautiful Wabelovia formosa and decided to find it. It took 6 years till I saw it on 3,200 meters above sea level in the south of Armenia. But while I was looking for it, I learned many other things about nature and plants during those 6 years. And finding Wabelovia formosa was one of the biggest joys of my life. Another joy was finding Fritillaria gibbosa. in Armenia, where in its classic location, it almost you cannot see it anymore, unfortunately. But I was happy to find a new location of it, little location of it. Yeah, I think these are the most beautiful and rarest plants in Armenia, and many people come to Armenia to see them.
Mm-hmm. Could you just spell for me, please, the one that the Formosa one?
Vavilovia formosa. It's a plant of Fabaceae family. It's a little bean, and it is an alpine plant. Yeah.
What it struck me reading the book was that a lot of the wild plants in Armenia are things that we might recognise in, say, the UK as a garden plant. What are some really common plants that you have in Armenia that we would also see, widely used in cultivation?
I think all the plants I just named would be beautiful garden plants, and they are wild in Armenia, and the Armenians don't cultivate them. And also alliums, I think, because there are lots of alliums here, beautiful alliums, big and little, and tall and not tall alliums, lilies, orchids, bellflowers, and some plants of Caryophyllaceae family and plants of Primulaceae family. All those plants might be as garden plants in other countries.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose it would be really interesting for us gardeners who use them, in the garden, to see them in their natural environment, to see what sort of conditions they prefer. So, especially things like alliums, I think that we probably don't have the garden conditions for them really in say the UK. What would be your favourite? I don't know if this is a relevant question, because I'm not sure whether, as you say, you necessarily cultivate your wildflowers in your gardens. But if you did, what would be your favourite wild plant to grow in your garden?
I live in a flat in the capital of Armenia, and it's my dream to have a land and to create my little botanical garden, where I would certainly grow all those plants I mentioned, and also roses. There are many species of roses in Armenia, and among them Rosa hemisphaerica, which is my favorite. It's a beautiful bush with bright yellow flowers, as well as sedums, plants of sedum genus, scabiosa, pyrola, some astragalus. There are really beautiful plants of astragalus genus here, fragrant and with nice flowers. Latirus and of course campanula. I would grow in my botanical garden.
Nice. Do you have a botanical garden in Armenia?
Yes, there are botanical gardens in Armenia, but the biggest is in Yerevan, where used to be more than 1,000 species of our local plants in Soviet times. Unfortunately, now they grow not as many plants there. It's more now like a park for people to walk there, to have picnics, unfortunately. But it used to be a very rich garden in before 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
Yeah, so thinking, a lot of the plants you've described probably have very specific growing conditions needed in order to flourish. So I think the best place to see them would be to see them growing in the wild. But do you have to be careful in terms of conservation? Do you just have to be careful that you're preserving the natural environment as well whilst taking people out to see the plants?
That is a painful issue in Armenia. There are recorded protected areas, more than 24, I think, more than 24 protected areas and nature reservations in Armenia. But there is no real care of native flora here, unfortunately. And almost everywhere you can see grazing animals. and some construction, even in protected areas. Some activists raise the issue of nature conservation, publish articles, organize events, but this problem leaves much to be desired, unfortunately, here.
How is climate change affecting the native flora? Is that having an effect?
Yeah, the summers and even springs are becoming drier and drier. And last year we had a really dry summer, really hot and dry summer, and that was sad to see nature. The country is becoming hotter and drier.
Can you notice a change in the plants that are growing or where they're growing as a result of that?
Yeah, they start. Yeah, I see that because the plants. There are plants flowering in, for example, in June. They flower in May. The plants which flower in May, they flower in April, and the flowering time becomes shorter, and sometimes they are not as big as they used to be. So yeah, I noticed that. And the rivers are water is becoming less, and
so when you're out looking for plants, do you have to be careful for your safety? Is it sometimes risky to do that?
I never collect plants, and when I have groups, I always ask them to be careful, not to walk on the plants, to save them. And we all only take pictures. My groups people take only pictures. But unfortunately, as I told, that the overgrazing is becoming a trouble for Armenia. Till we have lots of wilderness. For example, I traveled in Central Asia, in Iran. I saw the result of overgrazing in those countries. It's a disaster for those countries. In order to see wild plants, you must drive hours and hours to go higher and higher to find wilderness. In Armenia, still, we have that. We have lots of wild nature around the cities, around everywhere. But because of these animals, this overgrazing, that is becoming a problem. That is my main pain when I go to nature, where I see that people are taking their animals without caring nature and rare plants. Yes, it's a protected area, it's a nature monument, but there is no care from the government, real care from the government to protect those areas.
Is it farmers taking their animals to graze on what is effectively common land?
Yes, it is becoming more common, yeah, unfortunately.
What could be done to prevent that, though? You think that's a government's responsibility to...
Yeah, because people cannot regulate that. It's a responsibility of the government. But we try, all the people who are involved in that area, all the people who are interested in nature, we organize the events, we talk about that, we publish articles, we try to do something to protect nature.
So now you've written your book, what's next on the list for you? Are there still areas that you want to explore?
In Armenia, you mean? Yeah. There are, of course, because it's so mountainous. You can see this slope, and you always want to see what is on the other side of the mountain or in the other gorge. Yes, there are lots of parts I would like to go, and I would like to see what is there. That's why I think maybe I find more plants than recorded in the list of the flora of Armenia.
Have you found any plants yourself? Have you discovered any?
Yes, just some plants which are not recorded in Armenia. They're recording in Iran, for example, in Turkey or in Georgia, but not Armenia. From time to time, yes, I find the plants, and that makes the list of the Armenian plants longer and bigger.
So if people wanted to come and visit Armenia and see the plants, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. People can easily travel in Armenia anytime. It's a comfortable country to travel in. There are good hotels everywhere in the country, hiking trails, and all sorts of guides. People are hospitable and helpful here. Food is delicious, and nature is beautiful almost everywhere. If people are going to travel for plants, the best time to see irises, because usually when people come first time to Armenia, they want to see irises. When they see irises, then they want to see other plants. But first thing they want to see irises. It's May. The best time to see much more plants and drive up to the mountains is June and July. By the way, June is my favorite time when you still see spring plants, irises, fritillaria, tulips, and at the same time you see summer plants. And August also is an interesting time to travel in Armenia to see late summer plants, and again to drive up to alpine zones to see alpine plants. So people who want to see irises, they have to come in May.
Okay.
Early May.
And then stay for the summer. Would there be a particular base that is good for exploring, or a particular region?
It depends. It depends on the season, because as I told, summers are very hot here and dry. So those parts, it's better to go in May and June. In April, when the weather is not as dry as in July and August in September. But there are parts, it's better to go in June and July, even in August, to see more plants. It depends on elevation.
Yeah. And if they wanted to travel with you, is that a possibility? Are the tours running again?
Yeah, I organize trips. I have my own little tour agency. And from time to time, people write me and ask me if they can join to my trips. And I offer them different times and trips, and they join.
And is Armenia opened up again now for travel?
It's very easy you don't need any visa to travel in Armenia. It's very easy to come to Armenia. There are flights from Europe, from everywhere to Yerevan. And it's very easy to travel in Armenia.
Well, I don't know about you, but I've just added a trip to look at the plants of Armenia to my bucket list. Thank you, Tamar, for being a guest, and thank you to you as well for listening. Dr. Ian Bedford is here now to talk about the role of UV light in a bug's world.
Ultraviolet light, referred to as UV, is a form of electromagnetic radiation that primarily comes from the sun. And with a wavelength of between 10 and 400 nanometers, it's at the furthest end of the blue light spectrum. But since the lower limit of human vision is around 400 nanometers, UV light is basically invisible to us. However, this is not the case for a few bird and mammal species, or for the many different creatures from the insect world, whose retinas contain UV-sensitive photoreceptors that enable them to see UV light. But until ultraviolet was first discovered during 1801, and the first UV lamp created 100 years later, the importance of this hidden spectrum to so much life on Earth was unbeknown to us. As with the many millions of years that biological systems had been evolving around UV light, systems that quite literally left us and the many other UV-blind animals trailing in the dark. But our understanding of how this light is used by nature is expanding, and since the 1930s, when UV lights became readily available for research purposes, we've been able to reveal many incredible things that have evolved to exploit it, such as the daylight flowering plants, whose flowers display UV reflecting patterns that attract and guide bees into their corollas, and the pollinating moths that are drawn to nocturnal flowering plants, such as night jasmine and datura, whose white or pale-coloured fragrant flowers glow like beacons in the ultraviolet light that's reflected by the moon. But there's clearly so much more to learn about UV light within the insect world, other than it being just a means of guiding pollinators to flowers. Since just 40 years ago, it was discovered that in addition to seeing UV light, certain butterfly species also reflected it from areas on their wings, producing unique wing patterns that communicated their presence to other butterflies and attracted mates. Then, it was later found that UV reflecting wing patterns were far more common on moths than butterflies, which could explain why moths are so easily attracted to UV emitting artificial lights, where they could display and signal their presence. And this could also provide an explanation for the recent revelation that populations of moths have dramatically declined in areas where LED streetlights have been installed, since LED lights don't emit UV, and their brightness might actually mask UV from other sources, and so prevent moths from seeing their unique UV reflecting wing markings and finding their mates.
You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.